What up, crackers? I think we can all agree that today we live in a time where there's very little originality. Most movies, television shows, and video games are either sequels, reboots, or revivals of some older franchise. Lately, all the buzz has been around revivals. Shows like the new Fuller House, which is a revival of the old Full House, everyone's favorite sitcom. Also, Prison Break got a new season after wrapping up a few years back. We got a new Star Trek series. And also with movies, a few years back, we got Star Wars The Force Awakens. All the, Marvel superhero films like new Spider-Man. And we also had Jurassic World. And of course, not to mention last year had some of the two most important revivals of all time. One of them is, of course, the 2017 revival of Twin Peaks. And the other, perhaps even much more important than that, we got a new season of George of the fucking Jungle. Woo! George of the Jungle. Give it up for George! Now today we're going to be looking at a few of those revivals, and we're going to see which one does it right, which one does it wrong, and what are the requirements of making a good revival. Now what I'm going to take as an example of a revival done poorly is the new Star Wars. Now I know a lot of people love the new Star Wars, and I'm not opposed to them. I don't hate the new Star Wars. I like The Last Jedi, I enjoy The Force Awakens, I fucking hate Rogue One, but I'm not like a hater of the new Star Wars. However, I don't think that it's a really good revival. And the way that I'm going to prove that is by comparing it with the new Twin Peaks, which I consider to be the best revival of all time.
It all cannot be said aloud now.
Now, in order to perfectly analyze this, I have set up 3 rules that every revival should abide by. The first one is keeping the spirit of the original. The second one is innovating, adding something new to the source material that we didn't have before. And 3, having a reason to exist. And the third one is possibly the most important. Okay, now let's look at the number 1, the spirit of the originals. A lot of people would agree that the new Star Wars films are in the spirit of the originals, although a lot of people say that The Last Jedi isn't. But a lot of people will say that The Force Awakens, we're going to look at The Force Awakens because that's the first film that, revived the franchise. A lot of people will say that The Force Awakens is in the spirit of the original. Let's take a look. In order to really see if it's in the spirit of the original, we have to take a look at what exactly is the spirit of the original. Now, a lot of people say that being in the spirit means that you have to feel like it. Watching the new Star Wars film has to make you feel like you're watching the old ones, and that is sort of the spirit of the original. And I would have to disagree, at least in what I consider to be the spirit of the original. Now, in order to explain what I consider to be the spirit of the original, we're gonna have to take a look at what the original Star Wars meant for the people and to the world when it first came out. When the original Star Wars came out, it was like nothing the world has ever seen before. It was something new. Sure, it was inspired by 2001: A Space Odyssey, but it was completely different from that film. The reason that people fell in love with AT-STs, TIE Fighters, fucking X-Wings, Death Star, whatever the fuck, it was not because it was something that they've seen before and that they loved. It was something that was new to them. So the spirit of the originals and the reason that they're so great compared to the new ones is not that because they gave you exactly what you wanted, they gave you something that you didn't even know you wanted. It was something new, it was something fresh, and it took the world by such a surprise. And that's the spirit of the original, the innovation, the creation of something new, a beginning of a new era for films. And the new Star Wars films, in my opinion, just don't have it. They're not something new that we've never seen before. They didn't catch us by surprise. They didn't give us something that we never knew we wanted. They just gave us exactly what we wanted to see, and they just showed us exactly what we already know. And that really brings us to the second rule, the innovation. By bringing us exactly what we know and exactly what we've seen before, they don't really innovate. The original Star Wars films, everything was innovation. There was nothing, it was all created from scratch, from nothing. And then the new ones come along and they just reuse the same shit, even reusing the same story as the original film. There is nothing new to the table. Now, by bringing something new and innovating, I don't mean just adding more ship designs or changing a little bit of the stormtrooper designs or adding better special effects or creating new characters. I mean giving us something that we've never seen before, at least in a Star Wars film. The closest thing to innovation that these new movies have is the character of Kylo Ren. He is unlike anything we've ever seen in a Star Wars film. He starts off as being a Darth Vader type character, but he turns out to be something much, much more. Which kind of baffles me because a lot of people hate Kylo Ren, calling him a pussy or a whiny little shit or whatever. But he is the closest thing to something new that we got in Star Wars, in the new Star Wars films. And The Last Jedi, even though it did a lot of things differently, and it had a lot of subversion of expectations and whatnot, it still didn't innovate. It still gave us a pretty much story that we've seen in The Empire Strikes Back, and killing off the main villain isn't really innovating in any way. And that brings us to the third one, a reason to exist. Well, aside from money, of course, what is the real reason for the new Star Wars films? And I can't really think of any. Now let's take a look at what reason someone would actually have to make a new Star Wars film. Now, we already said that it isn't in the spirit of the original. And we already said what the originals meant for the world. So, if someone had a new idea that would take the world by storm, like the original Star Wars trilogy did, then you could say you have a reason to. But, of course, I understand that there are a lot of films since Star Wars that expanded on the formula, that made something new. And after so many years of a lot of sci-fi fantasies, and all of those like action films, it's really hard to give us something that we've never seen before. I understand it. So aside from that, what would be another reason to revive a Star Wars film? Well, a really great story. Not just a really good sci-fi story that could be Star Wars. I mean a new amazing story that can only be a Star Wars story. Something that's like so perfect for Star Wars. Something new that we've never seen before, and something absolutely amazing and incredible that everyone could get behind and say, this is a great movie, this is a worthwhile Star Wars film. But we really didn't get that. The new Star Wars film don't have anything special, and maybe in like the next 30 films we'll get one that's really good and really new and it's a really good story. But you also have to ask yourself, did this necessarily need to be a Star Wars film, or could have been just a random sci-fi story? Of course, Star Wars makes more money. So in terms, thus far, they haven't really given us any reason to really say we needed new Star Wars. So even though I do enjoy the new Star Wars films, they just fail all three categories. They're fine films, but they're a bad revival.
Hi, Patty.
Oh, hell no, the devil is a liar! Hell you mean that?
Now on the opposite side of the spectrum, let's take a look at the new Twin Peaks. In my opinion, this show nails all three of the rules. First and foremost, the spirit of the original. In order to analyze this, like with the Star Wars, we're gonna have to go back and see exactly what the spirit of the original Twin Peaks is, aka what it meant for the world. Now, Twin Peaks came out in the time where television was kind of a joke, and a lot of directors, producers, and whatnot didn't take television seriously at all. So when David Lynch and Mark Frost came together to make a new television show, a lot of people were kind of put off by it. Like David Lynch by that time already had a few really good films, critically acclaimed films, which was kind of surprising to a lot of people that he is moving to television. When what those two created was something that the world once again never seen before. It was the first television show that really had a long-running narrative throughout more episodes. Most of the shows before that were just episodic villain of the week type stories, or a issue of the week type stories. They never really had any narrative, any structure, any story to really get behind. Twin Peaks was the first series of its kind, and if it wasn't for Twin Peaks, we probably wouldn't have shows like Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad, Fargo, and a lot of others. So it was innovative in terms of the format of television that we got so far. And even aside from all of that, the higher production, the more tight story, the long-running narrative, better acting, better set designs, and all of that, even aside from all of that, the addition of David Lynch added a completely new layer to the show. David Lynch added a level of strangeness, a level of unknown. It was something that not only has never been seen on television, it was something that really has never even been seen on film. Now, for the most part, the show was a crime story. It was an investigation of a murder of a young girl. However, it also had elements of soap opera, as was familiar with a lot of television at the time. However, aside from all of that, it had a lot of Lynchian surreal horror to it. And it was the mixture of these three elements that made this show something that the world has never seen before. And until recently, until last year, never really seen since. Now, a lot of David Lynch films were like that afterwards, and a lot of television shows were inspired by Twin Peaks, and they used some of the same elements, but never really to that perfection. Some of the scenes from Twin Peaks are so surreal that they're almost dreamlike, or even in most cases, nightmares. So, in order for this new show to be in the spirit of the original, it needed to break new ground. And it did by being weird as fuck. Seriously, some of the scenes in this new show are so mind-boggling and are so fucking insane that it's something that we really haven't seen before. This show brings a lot new to the table, It's completely different from the original show, and it's completely different than anything we've ever seen before.
Close to mine.
Unfortunately, it doesn't have the same impact and reach as the old show because a lot of new people aren't really interested in seeing the revival of a show that's 27 years old. But it's exactly what it needed to be. It perfectly captured the spirit of the originals by being something completely new that we've never seen before. So, in my book, it checks out the first rule. Second rule, innovation. Holy fuck. As I already mentioned, a lot is something that we've never seen before. And it also subverts a lot of expectations, and it has a lot of balls, and it does something with its characters, something with its main character that no show ever actually did before. Another thing that it does really well is that it has enough fan service, but it gives it to us very sparingly. You will have full episodes of something completely weird and different and completely different from the original show, and then you'll get that one scene that like mimics, well, it doesn't really mimic, but they would play like a music from the original show, or they would show a character that we haven't seen for a long while, or we'll have some scene that's similar to the original. They'll make us go like, and then boom, back to new stuff, back to something that we've never seen before. So it innovates while still giving us a little bit of fan service. Just enough so that it's not completely fan service, but just enough to give us that satisfaction, because deep down we all want a little bit of fan service. So that brings us to the third rule, the reason to exist. Well, first of all, out of all the fucking revivals that we had before, this show has the most reason to exist. Why? Well, mostly because the original show never really ended. The show was abruptly cancelled, and it ended with one of the biggest cliffhangers of all time. And for the past 20-something years, people wanted more. People wanted a lot of unanswered questions to finally be answered. So the reason to exist is huge. We needed a new season. We needed a new story that would hopefully answer some of the questions that we had. And of course, even though it did answer some of the question, it added much more that it left unanswered. But that's a topic for another time. And aside from that, another reason that it had for existing is, as I already said, it innovated, it gave us a new story, and it gave us 18 hours of fucking great entertainment. So, in my book, all three of these rules are checked. And it abides by all three of them, and it even exceeds them. So in conclusion, when should a television show or a movie franchise be revived? A, if it was never completed. B, if you have a really good story to tell. And C, if you feel like you have something new to add to it. Otherwise, it's just a cheap cash-in. So even though I do enjoy the new Star Wars, it's a cheap cash-in. A lot of other movies like Jurassic World, it's pretty much also the same thing as Star Wars. It just gives us a bigger dinosaur, but it gives us pretty much the same story. Now, all in all, to wrap up, we can all agree that for the most part, you should not revive old franchises, especially if they are complete. Old should be left old, and new should be added. Of course, new doesn't make as much money as old, so, unfortunate there. But, you know, we can at least look forward to some good, like, one in a dozen good revivals like the new Twin Peaks, and just, you know, swallow all the shit that we're fed to by Hollywood. Well, see ya, I guess.
George of the jungle, strong as he can be. Watch out for that.